All right. I am Ben Burgis. This is Give Them an Argument. I am joined once again by the People's Econ Prof, Rob Larson. Rob, I just wanted to say, I know that what we're actually here to do is to break down the second round of Bruenig versus Brook on welfare. We watched the one a couple weeks ago where they were arguing about whether welfare is moral. This is the empirical part. They're arguing in this video about whether welfare works, which I'm definitely looking forward to. But before that, I did just want to touch on one other subject because I think that oftentimes, given the history of campus protests, we end up being very hostile towards, police or campus security coming in, and we're very suspicious of their motives. But I think you have to admit that sometimes they do, they do protect us from genuinely dangerous characters. So I just want to salute the thin blue line, keeping us safe from these people here in this video.
I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do for you right now?
Philosophy department office and tell them I've been requested.
Fill up philosophy department?
Yes. Call the philosophy department office.
I will. What's your...
I'm chair of the philosophy department.
I got you.
President-elect.
I got you. I'm so sorry.
Well, she looks very threatening, Ben. I mean, first impressions, I was very afraid.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they hadn't apprehended this woman, it's entirely possible that she would have made like a cutting remark at a Q&A after a lecture. It's possible she would have written something critical in somebody's exam, possibly with red ink. I know too, as many people point out, we don't have context. We don't know what she was doing before this. She was probably firing rockets for the office window, before the video started rolling.
She threw a rock at the edifice of established continental philosophy.
Yeah, exactly.
I should think, my God, like the optics coming out of all of these campus actions are just like stunningly really good for Israel supporters. I think, their constant wall of stormtrooper looking city and state police. They look very, that's the side I think a lot of young people are going to see and be like, I'm that giant, awful, grimacing guy with a baton and not the sympathetic young person with a seemingly innocuous demand that we stop participating in ethnic cleansing. So
yeah,
who knows what this legacy will be.
Yeah, exactly. Probably in the future when we all think back to this, we're just going to be really happy that, that woman was, was taken care of, right? That that she's no longer a menace to society. I mean, that's really what I care about.
I why do we lock our doors at night? We're afraid
that middle-aged philosopher
academic is going to come in their penny loafers and kill me. That's what I fear most.
Yeah, exactly. This is like whatever else. I've got to say, I mean, on the plus side, if your goal is to get people to stop protesting, I don't think this is going to do it. I think that the people seeing stuff like this happen might very well have the opposite effect, as seems to have been the case in the past. I mean, it's even like really amazing, right? Like that they have, if you go back and look at the timeline of all this, that, Columbia, first called in the cops literally the day the encampment went up. The New York Times had an article about it the other day. And the president of Columbia had been testifying before one of these, god awful McCarthyite, congressional hearings. And She didn't even wait to go back to New York. She was at a law firm. She used
DC, yes.
the offices of a law firm in DC to set up a war room to coordinate the the crackdown, right? So this is, and by the way, like
War room.
War room. Like if
That's funny because there was a war involved in this story
somewhere.
Wasn't there? I've just been thinking about campuses so long. No, there was.
Yeah, there was an actual war somewhere in this story, in the chain of cause and effect leading up to all this. But in this case, the war room was to coordinate the response to people who, like, my God, you think that woman was threatening? I mean, just just wait until you see the drum circle at Columbia. They like you run screaming in the opposite direction because you don't want to, you don't want to encounter, a drum circle in a back alley at night. Let me tell you what. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm just so utterly disgusted with the whole thing. That you just have, you just have a situation where there are real serious atrocities going on in the Middle East. And like, really, honestly, I mean, I think we're at the level of the kind of thing that it's like, if you have grandchildren, they will be reading about this in their history class, right? Like, this is, we're talking about millions of people being displaced, tens of thousands of children dying, and you have people who are trying to speak out against the country's involvement in these atrocities, which is always the thing that people conveniently forget. They're like, oh, why aren't you protesting? This other random thing I could think of, that happened in a distant country that the United States has literally nothing to do with. Right. It's like, a protest isn't just like a random display of emotions that you feel about something you read in the news. Right. It's generally an attempt to change government policy. Right now, the policy of our government is to support what's going on in Gaza.
Paying for it, pay for it.
Yeah. Those 2,000-pound bombs, being dropped on, refugee camps, like those are American-made bombs, right? That's the thing that people are protesting. And, I don't know. I just see people who have lost their minds about this because they're incapable of thinking about anything except through the prism of their culture war fixations about America. And it's like, they, just like, oh my God, did you see that they held hands to form a human chain? My God, man, that's violence. Like,
IPD, arrest these people.
Yeah, God, got to call in the counterterrorism unit for that one.
Yeah, that's bomb disposal.
Did you realize there was a human chain? I mean, they have that's like, if if we allowed this situation to fester for another 15 minutes, there could have been singing. Like, you just never know.
It's amazing. Yeah, people don't want to admit that the left, it escalates to folk songs just incredibly quickly, and that's a danger. Send in the drones at that point. Yeah. But it's amazing too, because we just got done condemning Putin to death in absentia for doing this kind of shit in specific places in Ukraine, like in Mariupol, where he shut off food and water and power for some time during that siege. And everyone was saying, it's a war crime. You should be put to jail, and the International Criminal Court should judge you. And it's just like the entirety of the Gaza policy. And it's, well, yes, but I heard on a campus someone said something untoward.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I'm not, if you want to convince me that sometimes undergraduates say stupid shit, like, I'm not going to be a hard sell on that, right? Like, I have my lived experience does not lead me to think that this is a thing that never happens. But
we're the ones who have to take that. We're the ones who put up with dumb undergrads. Like, we are the targets. Just FYI, like, we're the ones in a position to fucking know. We are the veterans of those campaigns to teach your shitty kids fractions or whatever. You know?
Yeah. But like, just, you know, I don't know. I mean, I also think like, and I'm not even against criticizing, like, if, you know, people are protesters, they say something bad, whatever, criticize it. But like, I also think like, you know, college is a time when people are figuring stuff out. That's a big part of the point of college, right? That you're figuring stuff out. And you know, if not all of the political interventions of 19-year-old are perfect and well thought out, then, you know, fair enough. But I mean, like, at the end of the day, these are people who are trying to stop the United States from funding atrocities. And you know, I'd really like a little bit less hand wringing about their terrifying human chains and you know, their terrifying hand holding and chanting, and you know, a little bit more sympathy, I think, for what they're trying to do. So and my God, I mean, this is the, you know, this is like, also just what keeps getting me about this is like, hey, you know what? You want this to go away?
Yeah. Divestment is not, yeah, just to take that up, you know, great coverage of that in the Journal this morning. It's like, well, we're invested in like funds, and it's mutual funds, and it's like lists of stocks, and our money manager has a lot of discretion over that. That's how we grow the university endowment. And, you know, like classic, like investing terms like ROI, you know, and projected, you know, like its yields. It's just the university is capitalist, as all of us are bitterly familiar with. But they were making the point, like, it would be logistically difficult for us to do it. That's why, you know, it's
no, I'm sure you couldn't figure that one out, right?
Troublesome to us, and we get paid twice what faculty make to not ever be troubled. Like, we should never have to do any. Obviously, if it's difficult to stop paying for genocide, we should try. Obviously,
yeah. No, look, if the university's accountants had to pull an all-nighter to figure out how they're going to like rejigger the investments, like,
oh no,
I'm sorry I even asked. This is anyway. Okay. Well, I really wanted to say all that because that is all I've been thinking about for the last couple of days. I do want to get to the main event tonight, and before then, I know you had something you wanted to mention.
Oh, yeah, right on. Hey, folks, I'll be doing a library journal event in a couple days, and it's supposed to air on May 9th, which is a few Thursdays from now, at 4 Eastern. So you can conveniently watch all these programs together. This is just a panel with a couple of other folks, and it's related to the themes of my new book that I got coming out in August on the ruling class. So if you enjoy Rob Larson content, that's a great way to see me say a bunch of stuff at my maximum performance level, because it's for librarians. It's a library journal, and there is no more crucial constituency to impress, both for goodwill and book reach, and also for flirtation purposes. So I'll be at the peak of my game for that one. Nate Silver was originally supposed to be on this panel, but he pulled out.
Oh, no shit.
Guess he folded his hand there. He's a poker guy now, so he'll get that joke. Yeah, come by, folks. That's 4 p.m.
That's actually a shame. If you were on a panel with Nate, I'd be very curious if he remembers me.
I was so excited to talk directly to him instead of about the book. But that's on the Library Journal web presence on their website on that day and time. So come on by, folks.
Fair enough. Nice. Yeah. While we're at it, on a week from hold on. I can do this. A week from tomorrow, I believe. The details are still being firmed up as far as all the room and everything goes, but anybody's watching this in central New Jersey, a week from tomorrow, I am going to be contributing to the appalling takeover of elite campuses by mobs of hand-holding ruffians. by giving a talk at Princeton. It's basically the same one I gave a little while ago in Detroit. But I believe that's going to be hosted by the Alliance of Jewish Progressives. That sounds right. At Princeton, called "Debunking the Many Bad Arguments Made by Israel's Apologists in the West." That's going to be, I believe, a week from tomorrow at 3:30. I think room number to be announced. But since I have not plugged that yet on stream, this seemed like an excellent time to do so. So with that, we will leave foreign policy behind and get into the welfare state. And
I've been looking forward. I've been looking forward to this day that I could get into the welfare system finally.
Yeah. It's it is. Sorry, I'm just looking for the link here. So yeah, in the okay, where are we? Good TV, I know. So yeah, in when we last checked in with Yaron and Matt, they were arguing about the morality of redistribution to fund the welfare state.
Right.
But now they are going to be talking about the empirics of it. I will maybe note. There we go. Can stop stonewalling because I found the video. I will note that the two subjects, by the way, just as a fun fact, the subject we've been talking about and the subject we're about to be talking about are not 100% unrelated, because the same money. This is a fact about how money works. Actually, I've got an economist here, so he can confirm or deny. But the same money that you can use to buy 2,000-pound bombs to drop on Palestinian children could instead be used for social services.
Well, Dr. Burgess, these kind of comparisons are very facile. Here's the real question. Do countries have a right to defend themselves or not? It is, in fact, true. I must admit that money can be used for interconvertible purposes, and you could, sacrifice some guns for butter. Yes, of course, you could do that, but one shouldn't.
One shouldn't. Okay, fair enough. Well, on that note, let's watch Matt Bruenig, Yaron Brook, does welfare work?
The morality of welfare, of course, pretty much every, I hesitate to say every, such an absolutist term, but I think literally every country on the planet has some sort of, tax and distribution welfare program. And certainly many local governments and provincial governments, the same exact thing. And so a common talking point amongst left-leaning figures is that welfare alleviates poverty, spurs upward mobility, and of course shrinks inequality. And obviously, while right-leaning figures often say essentially the opposite, that welfare will actually, despite the morality, welfare actually hurts people, right? It purports to help by creating dependency, laziness, creates economic stagnation. So actually, even if you think welfare is good, maybe it's actually bad, it turns out. And so we started with Yaron last time, so I guess let's flip it now. Matt, let's start with you. And then Yaron, of course, you can jump right in. Matt, can the private market alone solve poverty? And what is your sense of the benefits of the welfare state? And that's particularly, maybe let's talk about the U.S., since we're all sort of, you're in Puerto Rico, Yaron, but, U.S. Territory, I suppose. We're all Americans to some degree. And in the world more broadly as well, if perhaps there's better examples of the welfare state. Does welfare help the poor? Does it hurt the economy? Matt, go for it.
Yeah, so it's useful to take a step back, especially if you're concerned about inequality and poverty, and understand why the private market has such problems in that area, right? So in a capitalist society, if you've set up your little capitalist institutions in their little capitalist ways, the income of the society is distributed using factor payments, which is to say payments to the factors of production. Frequently, we think of that as paychecks. People go out and work and earn, and certainly Yaron likes to emphasize that aspect of it. But also, obviously, of course, people receive things simply because they own stuff, including land and capital, without working, right? And so you got people who own things and they receive payments because of their ownership, and you get people who work and they receive payments because they work. But then you have this third group of people who don't work and also who don't own very much and therefore don't receive any of those ownership payments. And that group of people, they need income in order to live. They need consumption in order to live. But because they don't receive factor payments, they are unable to access it directly. And we mentioned this a little bit in the prior section here, but about half the population doesn't work. They tend to be in one of 6 categories: children, elderly, disabled, students, caregivers, and the unemployed. Those individuals make up almost all poor people in society. And to the extent that other people are poor, it's usually because they live with those people, right? Maybe you wouldn't be poor if you lived alone, but you had 3 kids and a disabled relative, and now you are poor based on the way we measure poverty on the family level. So the welfare state does a really good job of coming in and saying, hey, we've got this factor income system over here. It serves certain purposes, certain coordination purposes, let's say, but it has problems when it comes to distributing income in a way that creates equality and low poverty and senses of fairness and whatever. And so we're going to create this parallel system of income distribution, which we can call the welfare state, and call it transfer income, call it social income, whatever. Right? So I have these 2 systems of income and they work together, right? You've got factor payments, you've got tax payments, you got transfer payments, and together they make sure in an ideal welfare system that everyone is receiving some kind of income. You're either getting your paycheck, you're getting your dividend check, you're getting your child benefit, your old age benefit, your unemployment benefit, student benefits, caregiver benefits like paid leave. Everyone's getting something. And that helps because that you're going to have a lot lower poverty if everyone's getting something. It also helps in a way that I think people often don't recognize, which is that it helps equalize the sort of dependency burden, if you will, across the society, right? So some households, some families will have a lot of workers and very few non-workers, while others will have a lot of non-workers and very few workers. And if we can bring everything together, right, and distribute it out to all the non-workers in a kind of centralized way, you can negate that effect, right? So it creates more equality in that way, and it also creates a floor which helps you negate poverty. And so again, if those are things you are interested in, I know Yaron doesn't care about those things, but if you are interested in them, the welfare state is a very elegant way to get income to those individuals who are not eligible for factor payments within the kind of normal capitalist system.
All right, Yaron, what's your response?
So we talked about, Matt talked about poverty and inequality. Let's separate those 2 out. And I'll say right off the bat, I don't care about inequality one iota. I think it's an irrelevant issue. It's kind of a silly issue. It's a distraction. I do care about poverty. I don't want people to be poor. It'd be better if everybody's not poor. I believe, and I think it works out in the empirical evidence. The only way to get people out of poverty is through production. It's through growth. It's through economic success. It's through innovation and entrepreneurship. It's through creating jobs. It's by creating opportunities for people to be able to produce and create and get themselves property. That is by building, by creating. The system that is most geared towards, and always has been towards that, is a system of freedom. It's a system in which people are left free to make choices about their own lives and to go out there and produce without asking for permission. They use their capital without half of it being stolen by the government, and build, create, and lift everybody out of poverty, not from charity, but lift everybody out of poverty because everybody has a job. And indeed, the number of people working only increases in a free society. There's no reason students can't work while they're going to school. There's no reason there should be any unemployed. Most unemployed in a truly free market are choosing to be unemployed, and that's their problem, not mine. The issues of old age, which I am more familiar with than Matt, relate to the ability to work during your productive years so that you can retire one day. Why not? We live in a world today where one of the great benefits is you can work for a long, long time. And hopefully people should find jobs they love so that they want to work until they're very old. I don't think I'm going to have 20 years of retirement. Matt, I think, suggested that 40 years of his life he won't work. 20, I guess.
Childhood.
What's that?
I mean,
So we got 20 childhood and 20 old age. I really, really, really hope I do not have 20 years of non-work in my later years. I like working. Anyway, we have the capitalist system, the free market system has created avenues for us to be able to decide how we allocate our resources over time, decide how we kind of ensure against risks that we're worried about, whether it's old age or whether it's unemployment. The capitalist system gives us, or free markets give us all those potentials. What the welfare state does is it cripples much of that. That is, you've got choices in life. That is, you can either pour money into a welfare state, or you can innovate and grow and actually provide people with jobs. And it's difficult to do both. And as you increase the welfare state, innovation is going to decrease. As you increase the welfare state, job creation is going to decrease. Entrepreneurship is going to decrease. Capital gets crowded out. You've got a certain amount of capital, can either go to subsidize people. It could go to actually growing an economy so that those people have the jobs and all the benefits, which are not just material. They have a lot to do with respect and self-respect and self-esteem that comes from having a job and producing something for yourself and therefore earning property. So the welfare state, even practically, and I believe the moral is the practical, so it's not surprising, retards the ability to get people out of poverty. A free market would get people out of poverty much faster than the welfare state. And indeed, I think by now, if we had left the economy free for the last 100-something years, I think there wouldn't be an issue today of poverty at all, because everybody would be so rich. Now, they wouldn't be equally rich. Some people would be less rich than others. But even the poor would be, relatively speaking, rich. All you need is like 4% real growth a year, and you wipe out poverty in just a minimal number of decades.
A lot going on here.
Yeah. Nice big field of targets here to get in the crosshairs. Love Bruenig's opening. So good.
Yeah.
Just, here are the categories, students, elderly, caregivers, and so on. He's like, and that's most of who the poor is. They don't work. They don't own property. And he just completely leaves the property ownership alone, of course. It's Bruenig, so he's thinking of reform packages that are, realistic under capitalism. That's the Bruenig useful signature, and that's great. It has its big, useful place, and just uses that in a simple way to justify one of the other, systems of benefits there. Like, great, just so simple start. Really enjoyable there, And then, everything Yaron says is in libertarian world where everyone has similar amounts of capital, so we decide what to do. You and me and Warren Buffett, we're deciding together, and we're friends in a bar. Like, it's just the most... There's a reason this rings false so much. Doing big things takes capital. It's hoarded by a rich class and their institutions. That's the reality that just this whole, when one acts, one must account for that whole just from first principles tendency of reasoning in libertarian and especially like Austrian school or Randian tradition figures. it's just very annoying because of how much it takes place in a world where everyone just has some capital. The thing that really annoys me that he said, I'll just say this, is I really hate it when dudes talk about like, oh, it's great working. I love working. Retire. Yes. It's great to work late. Who wants to retire? I bet no one really even wants to. Welfare makes you with those seductive Social Security checks. You don't know what work is, sir. You work behind a computer in an air-conditioned environment. I know you do because I do too. Like many of us are nice professional jobs where you work in, conditions vary, but a lot of comfort. You often have moment-to-moment control of your work. You decide when you pee. I never heard a guy get off an Arctic shrimp boat. They're like, retirement. Who needs it? Like when you say that, you are just revealing what a pampered, privileged little Lord Fauntleroy you are. That is what is occurring in those moments, in my view.
Yeah, no, I flagged the same thing that that when he's talking about how, I hope I don't have 20 years of not working. I like work. It's like, yeah, dude, what do you do though? Like this is, like, trust me, we can't have an economy where everybody has a job at the Ayn Rand Institute. Right? Yeah. Like that doesn't work mathematically, somebody needs to grow the food, like, also, by the way, a problem with Galt's Gulch, but anyway, yeah, like I don't, it's like, yeah, of course, right? If you're doing like creative, interesting work where you have all this autonomy and, you're, as you say, you're in an air-conditioned environment, you can go pee whatever you feel like it, then
it's like a lot.
Yeah, like it's
privilege compared to what people have.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's like, yeah, this is very unlike what most jobs under capitalism are like. And this is, and you could say, I suppose, if you're in the arm position, it's like, oh, well, those other people should have just worked harder so they could, rise up the ranks or whatever. But above and beyond any other sort of more immediate kind of sociological realism sorts of objections to that, there is just a basic arithmetic problem, which is that everybody can't have those jobs, right? I mean, most jobs in any economy are not like that, right? Like you literally have to, like just for all of us to not starve to death, you need there to be people in the fields who are picking food. You need the people who are like driving trucks to bring the food from the fields to grocery stores.
Someone's got to clean the toilets, like it sucks. Yeah. I mean, look, everything breaks down. You need people whose whole job is getting in the awful dirty parts of things and fixing them. That's work. And those people are like, oh, retirement. When that day comes, I'm going to cruise my Jimmy Buffett boat into an island paradise. Retirement is a real thing for people who are blue collar because it's like the time in your life that you hope your life will be enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. If you're like a professor or a writer or whatever combination of,
Yeah, these are scam jobs. These are not real jobs, people. It's not
like if you do one of these things, then sure, lots of people never really want to retire completely and make sense, right? But like
retired now. This is retirement. Like it's happening already.
But if you I mean, look, I fully expect that, I'm going to be, like there's, that like, if I'm still alive at 90, I'm going to be asking the nice young man at the retirement home to help me understand how to use whatever they have instead of webcams at that point so I can do my show. But but again,
psychic orb or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's just not what most jobs are like, and it just really does come off very, very clueless to talk, and it's not what most jobs can be like. I mean, people, again, most of the tasks that need to be done are not this. Like it's like this is the problem with saying like, oh, we just need to have better education or whatever, so we'll have more upward mobility. It's like, well, not everybody can be upwardly mobile because like you need a structure for them to climb, right? There's a like not every cheerleader can be at the top of the pyramid, right? Like you have to have other ones
painfully true,
under them. So it's just like and which actually brings us to the interesting thing, even though this is the empirical part, the interesting normative claim that Yaron made. Because you're right. Matt did a sort of very nice, kind of elegantly straightforward,
so simple, charming. Like that's a guy that meets an audience where it's at. We could all learn from how Bruenig just incredibly street levels that out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, look, here are ways that people get money. They can get paid wages. They can own stuff and get payments, just based on their ownership without working. ... But
then these other people.
Yeah. But then what about people who aren't working and don't own stuff? Presumably we don't want to let them starve to death either. So we need to have some sort of system. And one system is you could just, hope that you have, family that's in a position to support you or whatever, and just sort of live at their mercy. But a more civilized system would be to have some kind of payment set up for them. And yeah, it is really incredible that he said, and it, you're right, he didn't mention most of Matt's categories of non-workers.
Oh yeah, no, it's like they're unemployed. They're choosing not to be bums, subtext bums, just like the bums lost Mr. Lebowski. Like that's the subtext of that moment there. Like all these other people, like the amount of people whose whole life is like caring for their debilitated family member. It's a stunning thing. And that connects to what we said earlier, a lot of jobs, aren't nice. Sitting around and typing and being on Twitter type jobs there, for example, caring for the retired who often need care, often the gross kind of care. Like that's a huge deal. Like these are social categories. Yeah. And we're just breezing by them. Like it's no problem. And it should be added to, just as an economist, I always want to get this into conversations. Like the money's there. It's a $24 trillion a year GDP. You can't understand how much money that is. We put $1 trillion a year into blowing up Iran. Like there's
right.
Money exists. Like we talk well, how that's going to take from me. Like some of you will not feel it. Like that is the reality of our distribution of income and wealth today. I always just want to make sure that that's in any conversation. Like the money exists. It's not like we're going to make everyone equally poor. Like it's a very wealthy country. But I already learned that if we just never had created welfare in the 60s, then all the poor would be rich. See, I learned a lot already from this first segment.
No, he leaned heavily into the libertarian fantasies that, they're sort of unfalsifiable. If we just went even further in the direction that I want, everything would be wonderful. But yeah, he didn't address, he addressed the retirees, said, well, you should have saved up more while you're working.
Who needs it anyway? Hey, everyone's job
anyway, yeah, you should have saved up more. And anyway, there's nothing wrong with working until you die. He ignored the disabled people, the children. He mentioned the students. He said, there's no reason you can't, work.
Oh yeah, that pissed me off also. Yes. Oh, God damn it. It's so hard. I just had a kid literally this week crying in my office, a student weeping because he's so stressed and exhausted because he's taking 15 really intense credit hours, including mine, and working a shitload of hours on the weekends, so he doesn't have any studying or rebuilding time. Literally a man, a young adult weeping in my little academic office, oh God, it's like, oh, work. These guys are always 2 sentences away from telling you that child labor is no big deal. Like it is.
Yeah, I kept expecting that one. It's like students. And by the way, when I say students, I don't just mean college students. They can all work.
Yes. Oh God! And we should just remember what Brooks said 2 weeks ago when we all were here enjoying the previous version. He said well, if you are born with a disability and you're not able to find commercial employment, and if your family won't or isn't able to care for you, yes, then that child will fall by the wayside. Rather than paying a tax out of his paycheck, it's well, yes, that child will die. His bones shall be crushed beneath our iron feet. Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah.
Fascist capital, the Ayn Rand people.
Yeah. And the thing he said, like, yeah, I mean, the children, again, I think a lot of this stuff actually takes us to, even though this is the empirical section, Yaron made a really interesting normative claim early and all that, which is, well, he separates out poverty and inequality, which is fair enough. Those are two separate issues, right? So one issue is like how much inequality there is, and the other is how bad is it at the bottom end of the inequality. You're right; those are analytically two separate issues, but I would argue that those are both bad. That that inequality is bad, and it's also bad if there's like lots of suffering at the bottom end of that inequality. And there are a lot of reasons to think that inequality is bad. That now one of them is that very often there is tons of suffering at the bottom end. So that's that's just to start with, but beyond that, people's I think that it's very bad for democracy that that some people have vastly more resources for others and can exert much more influence.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. Like the upper end of inequality is always we're like, oh, you just don't like that there's poor people. Like,
you're just jealous of their boat, right? That's
oligarchs are themselves a problem. Yeah, exactly. Yes, that is true. I actually am just jealous of your hippopotamus foreskin couch on your gigantic yacht. You got me there. Jesus Christ! Like people are so content with like white collar standards of living, but these guys just have to make $10 billion a year. If Michael Bloomberg doesn't make $6 billion every year, then he won't innovate more.
Yeah,
sad you'll be then.
It's like, yeah, look, I think inequality is bad for democracy. I think inequality is leads some people to be dependent on other people in ways that that lend themselves towards really bad forms of domination. And I also just think it's innately objectionable, right? Like if one person has much more than another and it's outside of the control of the person who has much less, that their life chances are worse. They don't get to do things the other does. It's like, look, you go back to his example about college. Like, I mean, first of all, I think we're just, are we pretending college is free in this example? But whatever, even ignoring that, like going back to the example about college, it's like, yeah, who doesn't have to work during college? People whose parents have more money, right?
Yeah, class-based, like everything else. Yeah, so you pay, the more you may pay, the more you may have. Yeah, that's...
So, like, this is yet another way that, like, so, yeah, look, I mean, it seems fundamentally unjust without needing to reference anything else to me that some people get to just focus on going to school and other people don't, right? And of course, everything Yaron advocates, is advocating widening that inequality. But of course, you just touched on the last thing that one of the last claims he made, and I suspect Matt's about to go into this because he smiled a little bit when Yaron said it. But Yaron said, well, if you have a big welfare state, innovation suffers. That that you can't do lots of welfare and also lots of innovation. To which I would say, citation needed.
Case not proven, court adjourned. Sheesh. Let's see. I think our boy Matt's probably gonna. I doubt he'll let him get away with that one.
So that's not true. I think part of the problem here is it's important to really distinguish between the sort of overall national income or national income per capita and the distribution of it, right? The thing that the welfare state does is it's able to get money to people that the market would not get money to, right? So maybe it's the case, it's not, but let's suppose it was the case that without the welfare state, factor incomes would go up by 4% each year instead of 3% each year or whatever it is, right? Okay, right, that would be his case. It's I cut the welfare state and all this innovation that's unleashed, the factor payments would grow faster. because of the incentives and innovation, whatever. Okay. But there's this whole group of people that do not receive factor payments. And so they are not going to directly benefit from the increase in the factor payment growth rates, right? So for those people, the only way to include them in economic growth is through the welfare system, right? And there's also a little bit of kind of, game playing here that's a little bit hard to track here, right? We know just empirically that, for example, elderly poverty used to be somewhere near 50%. They radically increased Social Security old age benefits. It drops down below 10%. You can see this in the time series. It's so clear. Even more recently, in 2021, I think it was, we had that big, fully refundable child tax credit. Essentially, they were paying $3,000 per kid. I think $3,600 for young kids. And child poverty cut in half in a year. And then they repealed it. Child poverty doubled in a year, right? It's as easy as that, mechanically speaking. I think it would be very hard to maintain that you can't achieve that desired distributive result. Right. And for him, what he needs to do is to come back and say, okay, yeah, maybe in the short term you can achieve that desired result. But in the long term, you would get such greater growth that actually people would be much less poor. The problem with that, again, is that the capitalist system does not have a way to get those payments to non-workers. We have factor payments and we have non-factor payments. A growth in factor payments is not going to get to the bottom. And there are great studies on this. Lane Kinworthy has done this across countries, where if you want to take the 5th percentile of the income distribution across many, many, many countries, the only way that percentile ever really moves is due to increase in transfer payments. It's not factor payments, because at that level of the distribution, they're not getting factor payments.
But it's just not true. I mean, you said that 50% of the people don't work and some of them are children. Well, children get factor payments from their parents. So their parents are getting factor payments. I hate that terminology. They get, the parents are either entrepreneurs or they're investors or they are workers, but they are benefiting from economic growth, and the children are benefiting as a consequence. If you look at elderly people save. So during their productive years, they save money. And therefore, as productivity goes up and wages goes up, they can save more money. As they invest those savings in stocks and bonds of a productive, growing economy, their retirement is worth more. And therefore, they are benefiting from the factors in elderly. The only people who are not are people who choose not to work. And I don't see any reason why they should benefit from anything if they choose not to work. And they're disabled. And the disabled are going to have to benefit one way or another from the work other people do, and through charity or through your welfare state. And therefore, the charity is going to only be larger if the factor payments to people who pay into charity are higher. That is, richer people are going to give more money than poor people towards charity and towards the disabled. Countries that are rich generally will support the disabled better than countries that are poor. So every single person in a society benefits massively. The only way they can benefit is when wealth increases, when growth accelerates, when production is greater, and when wages go up. So, in the welfare state, to the extent that it retards growth, to the extent that it retards wage growth, to the extent that it retards productivity growth, retards the ability of those people who are now receiving welfare. They're getting a lot less than they would otherwise.
So right, but this is the right. So you need the growth in order to also increase transfer payments, right?
No, because there's no.
No, but I mean, when you're saying, look, we need the growth in order for the welfare to work. You're calling it charity. I get all that, right? But here's the thing. You're going back and forth between saying, look, the only way we can have this good charity and these good transfers is if we have good growth. And therefore, let's cut the transfers in order to get more growth. But then the growth can't get into the transfer payments. The increase of the factor payments are not going to get to these people. And it's especially true for the poor. And I really want to cut in here, because that's the thing you said you wanted to focus on. If you want to talk about the 70th or 80th percentile elderly person, maybe they got enough in their IRA, right? But if you want to talk about someone who was on the 10th percentile of the wage distribution their entire life, those individuals do not have big retirement accounts. They're not going to have money in retirement. That's just factually true, empirically true. Now, you might say, oh, they should have scrimped and saved. They are just not. And the same thing for kids. The same thing for kids. The bottom 10, 20% of kids, whatever you want to make of it, their parents are not bringing in enough factor payments to cover themselves and their kids. And they certainly wouldn't be able to do that if we started pulling away things like free school or Medicaid and stuff like that. Now they got to shell out even more, right? So for those individuals, just empirically, factually, right, the factor payments are not enough. They're not getting to them, and they're not ever going to get to them because of the way the society is structured. So yeah, you've got to grow, but then you also have to give. You also have to transfer. Now, I do want to shift the debate a little bit. I'll let you talk, but I just want to shift the debate a little bit. It is not true that societies with smaller welfare states grow faster than societies with bigger welfare states. I'll give the example of the Nordic countries. The Nordic countries since the 1970s have had higher GDP per hour growth than the United States across the board. In some cases, very, very much higher GDP per hour productivity growth. There does not appear to be anything about the welfare state that on net causes growth problems. Now, you might want to say, oh, it'll cause incentives problems. Perhaps it causes incentives problems. But on the flip side, whenever you have a more equal society, and you especially whenever you're able to have a society with less poverty, that tends to have other effects in the other direction, right? Children who grow up poor, their brains aren't so good. They tend to be more likely to go to jail, do sort of socially destructive things. And then you also have on the flip side that whenever you have a welfare state, you have this thing to catch you if you fail. That can encourage risk taking, like innovative behavior, right? And whatever it is, whatever the mix is, maybe it cuts incentives here, maybe it improves individual endowments over here, maybe it cuts some risk taking here, but also encourages some risk taking over here. Whatever it is, the net of it empirically is that we do not see lower productivity growth in countries that have big welfare states, in countries that have compressed income distributions, equality, low poverty. We don't see that. So from a kind of factual perspective, right, if you can grow as fast while still having a more egalitarian distribution of income because of the welfare state, that society is going to get sort of better overall welfare, if you care about that.
Yeah, pretty strong there.
I keep thinking about so we do a range on here from we've watched James Baldwin debate William F. Buckley, but I also did a couple weeks with Victor and Ethan where we watched a debate about January 6th between Glenn Greenwald, Alex Jones, and the Krasensteins, and
that's a melee.
Yeah, it was. But the reason I was thinking back to that debate as we watch this relatively highbrow exchange here is that Alex Jones apparently does this thing in debates where he'll after he thinks he's made a really good point, he'll say, "Yeah, got your ass." And I really feel like Matt could have thrown in one of those at the end here.
That's definitely the moment for your signature move and catchphrase. If this was pro wrestling or a PvP format game, that's definitely what would occur at that stage. After that, so that was I would say Bruenig there, held the floor for a long time, definite combo move. So it's definitely that moment where you do your cool voice clip. Yeah, that's one thing Alex Jones does well, is have that kind of moment. Pretty enjoyable though, I gotta say. That's he's got Brooks' number here. I don't know. I don't want to say our boy is overmatched, but it's fairly strong, Yeah, exactly. I like that. Just recognizing, you may not care about poverty. That's okay. You said it'd be better if people were less poor. people who are at the bottom deciles there, like, yeah, they don't have big retirement accounts. Their kids, going a little bit too quickly through that, their kids, they have bad brains. It's meaning like poor kids, you're exposed to like more environmental pollution and shit. Like in America, you'll have lead pipes. Whereas if you're in a more like white collar community, you're much less likely to have any lead service pipes, let alone any fixtures in the house, like that's what that gets at. It's like these people won't be able to get commensurate factor incomes. They won't be able to save. Just straight realism there, which is so important in these debates because they get so abstract instantly. Libertarians and conservatives hugely prefer that kind of landscape, especially anyway. Keep it on principles. So you don't have to look at the ugly implications of these ideas. Pretty good. And again, if you can, as long as we have Scandinavia, we have like a broadly favorable example of policies to work on. If it hadn't been for us, Sweden and some of those other states, fairly legitimate democratic socialism by this time. If we look at how those things were kept from fruition in the 80s and 90s, it's not the best story. High productivity with welfare, like that's
no, for sure. I mean, look, it's going to be interesting to see how Iran responds at this point because there are a few different options that conservatives and libertarians can typically have to choose between when they're confronted with the existence of the Nordics. The most fun one is actually the Nordics suck, right? Like every now and again I will see somebody pull that out, right?
Good luck making that. Like they have a pretty good reputation.
Yeah, I mean it's a hard one to make fly, but every now and again I do see it. Mostly what I see are some, one or the other, some combination of a couple things. One is actually the Nordics are like super duper capitalist. That's what, there's that classic meme, the guys yelling at each other.
Super capitalist. Well, yeah, they have private property. It is a market economy, but huge state sector with a lot more equality. Isn't that all we're arguing for here, really?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? It's like, yes, you're right. These are not societies that have achieved full socialism. So, I think that, I think that there's more to be done, right? But they've certainly made massive strides in the right direction. And yeah, this is that classic meme with the guys yelling at each other. And, one of them says, oh, the Nordics aren't capitalist, aren't socialist at all. They're just capitalist with some this and that. And the other guy says, okay, could we do that? And there's like, no, that's socialism.
Yes. I saw that awful Matt McManus sharing that meme today.
Yeah.
He would.
Yeah, he would. This is, it's like, I remember in my Charlie Kirk debate a few years ago, I remember there's a point where he was like, oh, so you like Norway, don't you? And I remember when he said that, I was thinking, all right, where's this going to go? Is it going to be
fossil fuels?
Yeah, I was like, it's either going to be like they restrict immigration or fossil fuels, right? That's like the two places this could go. And so and I was like, yeah, man, I do. He was like, well, do you know where all that money comes from? That they,
where all the what? Huh?
For the welfare state.
Food comes from Creek. That's all I know.
Yeah, I was like, well, yeah. The state ownership of the oil company is where a lot of it comes from. And, if that's the, like, I don't know if you know that. I mean, I didn't say this part, but it's like, I said I would support doing the same thing in the US, but it's like, yes, I don't know if you know this, but you know where else has oil? Like we do, right? So like,
yes, thanks to hydraulic fracturing, we have oil. We could do that. I mean, what America has though, that's our big comparative advantage. I mean, that's Norway's comparative advantage, as we say in economics. Ours is the tech platforms, which are almost all like the big global ones, which are mostly based in the US. We ought to nationalize those motherfuckers. You're the guys who always keep us from doing it. This is
Which, by the way, I think you could sell on a bipartisan level because, look, Facebook can't shadow ban you once it's nationalized, the First Amendment, right? You know, if you're worried that your nephew isn't seeing your posts, you know, it's see, that'll take care of that. But
Congress shall make no shadowy ban, nor shall it downrank in the feed the right to expression. I think that's what that's great. I don't know. My only other bit on this little segment here is just I don't even know if I should feel like mentioning this, but like, does anyone else? We have a very hilarious chat going again this time. Does anyone else just feel like did leave a weird taste on your tongue that is Yaron was making that last bit about how the welfare state, one could say, impedes or slows the development of society?
That did hit me.
It hinders the growth of society.
You notice like just vocally, he really hit it too, right?
Just so hard every fucking time. I was like, is this like a secret Ayn Rand like technique where you like create prejudice against the disabled so that we'll be more heartless toward them and support your welfare state?
Yeah. Welfare state.
Yeah, you tell me. You know, I don't know.
Makes economic growth developmentally disabled. Yeah, it's
literally developmentally disabled would be preferable. It's more descriptive.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. No, I mean like the thing. So, but then like, yeah, that's a very common one. It's like, yeah, again, we've got oil. We could nationalize it. You know, and like ultimately, obviously, I'd rather, you know, long term, we're going to need to transition to other energy sources. But like, as long as we're using it, I would rather it be in the hands of the people and used to fund social programs than in the hands of, you know, of like mega profitable companies and used to fund shareholders not having to work. But
and how did Charlie take that? Did he have a?
I think he was just so surprised that like he kind of moved on to his next thing. But yeah, but then the other conservative option for Norway is you say, you know, you fool, you simpleton. This would never work here because of all the differences. And you know, and it's like, oh, it's a much smaller country. It's much more homogenous. It's this, it's that. And it's like,
that is funny, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's like, I always like our mutual friend Nathan has the best line on this. I think he uses this in his book, Responding to the Right, where he's like, look, you can't just name random that very one. You can't just name random differences between the countries. You have to give us a mechanism for why it would be relevant and like why exactly that would mean that the same policy would have a different effect here than it does there. Otherwise, you might as well just say, oh, we could never have a Norwegian style welfare state of the United States. We don't have fjords.
Yeah. And I know, like, that's so perfect. And just my response is always, well, that's like, I remember that was Anderson Cooper's first question of Bernie in the first debate was just like, you know, Denmark, sure. But America, a much larger country, like that's the opposite. Surely that's the opposite of the way the logic works there. How are we, a much larger, wealthier, and more powerful country, supposed to achieve what this relatively small state was able to do? Where's all that Yankee can do, put a dude on Mars bullshit now? It's like, oh, but healthcare, it's the technology.
No, clearly a heavier lift than the United States of America is capable of. Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like, and in fact, actually, Ethan pointed this out. I think the last stream I did with those guys, that look, smaller countries are more dependent on the world market than larger countries. So, like, if the question is how much social democratic reformism can we get away with in the US, that would sound like more. I mean, like ultimately it's like, yeah, I mean, it's less homogenous, but it's like, trust me, you know, black, brown, yellow, You know, what's the old stupid cliche? You know, purple,
Oh,
green with purple
law
polka
and
dots,
order
right?
cliche. Yes, that's.
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
Sam Waterston to say this to me if I have to listen to it.
Yeah, regardless of skin tone, you know, poor people, once they have more money, become less poor. And it's just not obvious to me what the connection's supposed to be here. I can understand the connection if you say, well, it makes it easier to stigmatize recipients if it's less homogenous because you can appeal to racism. It's like, yeah, okay, but like, you know, should you just preemptively surrender to people doing that? Like, that's, you know, and also, by the way, this is a reason to have universal programs, not means tested programs. Because if you have universal programs, everybody benefits. You don't think it's like, oh, those gross other people who are, you know, who are getting my hard-earned money, because everybody's getting it.
We all have equal fire department having.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's completely happy. You never have to think about it. Like we've all had the same. Like it's a favorable thing, yeah. And yeah, I think HG in the comments there brought up the other thing that they'll say about Norway, which is so annoying. I tried to forget it. Yeah, it's like you said a second ago, like less diverse, more homogeneous. That is the same thing, I guess. Like that's just like, well, you know, we have black people. We can't.
Yeah.
How can we have nice things when there's Hispanic people that I see at the store and maybe they're MS-13 members?
Yeah, yeah.
So no social welfare can ever be cheap.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, since we are, after all, watching Matt Bruenig here, it's worth mentioning that I remember him having great stuff at the People's Policy Project like a couple of years ago about the claim that will sometimes be brought up about how wonderfully free market some of these places are, that like the things that they'll generally bring up are like, oh, it's like there's like less paperwork to like start a new business, which one is not really the kind of regulation that like social democrats and socialists typically argue about with conservatives and libertarians. But two, as Bruenig pointed out, it's like, yeah, there is less paperwork. You know why? Because they have more centralized government systems. It's the federalism that, you know, provide that like leads to
state and federal bullshit. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, worth thinking about. But in any case, I have this. So we have gotten, I know it's been a while since we played it, so we're going to go back to it. When last we left our heroes, Matt was asserting that, in fact, the real life example, the Nordic, shows that you can have lots of innovation and a big welfare state. I hope he also points out somewhere here that a tremendous amount of the innovation that happens in the American economy is state funded. But in any case, let's find out.
Well, I don't know what better welfare means. I don't know how you even estimate that. But a few things. It's not an empirical fact. Because you don't have the counterfactual. What you have is a welfare state. What you have a welfare state that pumps a little bit more, a little bit less money in the short run into a particular area. You don't know what a actual free market how much old people would have, how much poverty in old age would be, how many children, what would happen with children in an actual free market. Indeed, I could project easily that, as I said, with 4% economic growth, the poor who work, the working poor, would be far better off than they are today. And their children would be better off because their parents are better off. And in old age, they would be better off because they would be saving for old age. And they would have a lot more from which to save. So, but again, you're using empirical as if the reality that exists today is all we have. Right, it is. It's all we have. So I don't have the counterfactual. I don't have the alternative universe.
What do you make of the big welfare states grow as fast as the small welfare states? Does that mean nothing to you? Or you're saying, look, once you get over the threshold, it's all hell from that point? And I'm
saying if you look at GDP per capita of Sweden and Finland, it's like Mississippi in the United States. Right, so those countries would be poor if they were states in the United States. So GDP per capita in welfare countries is low. It's low as compared to the U.S. And I would add, right, the U.S. is a welfare state, right? So it's not like we're comparing free market to a welfare state. We're taking a variety of different welfare states. Sweden and Finland are small countries that happen to be very efficient in their welfare distribution. They're good at it. The United States is, as you know, the United States is pathetic. It's got 3,000 different, welfare programs, and they're really bad. And the reality is that the differences, because you have to control for different regulatory regimes. In many respects, Sweden and Denmark are less regulated than the U.S. It's much easier to run a bank in Sweden and Denmark than it is in the U.S. I know bankers in the Nordic countries that would never come to the United States. Right? Even labor laws in many respects are easier. It's easier to fire people in the Nordic countries than it is in California. I mean, you can shake your head, but I've actually talked to business people and people who've done business in both sides. They would rather be in Denmark than the U.S. in many, many respects because of the lower regulatory burden. The United States is ridiculously, irrationally regulated. So again,
way too soon for a real stop, but I just wanted to briefly note that he seems to be simultaneously employing. This is a bold move. He seems to be simultaneously doing a little bit of actually Denmark sucks. That their growth is like Mississippi, or their GDP is like Mississippi, and also a little bit of like actually their super duper free market.
Yeah, kind of having it both ways here. Like, no, they're actually poorer than us, but because they, yes, are wealthy, they can afford these little things. They're just good at it. We're just not. We're not a more capitalist-run society. Don't infer anything from the fact that we're just... You can
compare countries, but you have to be able to control for the right factors, and almost nobody does. And then if you take into account total spending by governments as a percent of GDP, the differences are not that great. Yes, Sweden and Finland spend more, but not a lot more. We do it less efficiently. The United States, if you take in state, local, and federal government, spends almost as much as the Nordic states do in terms of government spending, even if you take out
Awesome. So they don't spend that much more than we do. They just do it more efficiently. So, all right. So to be clear on this, we could institute all the same programs here and Yaron wouldn't be that upset about it.
Sounds like he's just unhappy that it's inefficient. I think his message is we need to invest in the system to streamline the welfare delivery system that we have in the United States. That's certainly how I took that message. I think I've got him right there. But I like that moment too. Just that's so simple. Like that's yet another. This is good that we're thinking about these. That's another deflection that idiots use when talking about Scandinavia and its promising configurations of policy. Is to say, it's not so good there. I talked to a guy who's from there, and I heard from him that it's not so good. Yeah. So if you try that, you're not being serious and using data. But I can definitely say that. And I always find in general, like when you talk to people like who you meet, especially like in a college town environment, when you meet people from overseas, they're often people who aren't wild about it, and that's why they're where you are. That's why they're not in their own country. Like every time you meet a guy from Chile, I found they're often like, Pinochet is very misunderstood. Like, oh, that's why you're here. Your family has money. They sent you here. Like you would meet like the people who had wealth and were disturbed by social democracy back where they come from here. Not to imply that every foreigner you meet is like a Cuban. Gray, however, it's
not a good sample size. It's not a good randomized sample of the original, to put it mildly. It's also just I talked to a guy. It's like, yeah, sure, but like there are lots of guys, right? They don't all have the same takes.
Fuck, he talked to a guy. We should have thought of that. Holy shit.
It's like, credit where credit's due. I always remember many years ago, Glenn Greenwald wrote an article in Salon about how about sort of declining approval for the United States and Middle Eastern countries, and somebody in the comments, and maybe a good early sign of where certain things were going. Glenn, in this pre-Twitter era, pre-widespread, Twitter when it became era, was a very avid responder to the comment section at Salon, and he had
back in that era,
and one of the comments I remember was like, "Oh, I don't think that's true. I mean, my niece was just in Egypt, and people there love the United States." And I remember his response was, "Okay, wow, I guess we should just abolish public opinion polling and just send your niece to different countries to tell us what the people think."
That's so cheap and so great.
And if you take up military spending, it's just we distribute wealth, by the way, to the middle class, right? I mean, much of your welfare state is not there to help poor people at all. It's not even there to help poor kids. It's not there to help poor elderly in the United States. It's primarily there. Most of our welfare programs are there to help the middle class. People
they're there to help non-workers, which could be any group depending on how you define it.
Chosen not to work, right? The people who've chosen not to work, not people who don't have the ability to work. And why, go back to morality, why would we want to help people who choose not to work? And how is that economically good? And how is that morally good? It's morally perverse and economically self-destructive. You want people to work.
I want to push back certainly on the empirical questions here. So it's not the case that the OECD puts out this thing called the Strictness of Employment Protection Index. I don't know if you've ever looked at this, but the Nordic countries have much stronger termination protections than the U.S. has. Now, they do have less strong protections relative to other European countries. So I think that discourse gets a little bit confused sometimes. But
true, but pick out California out of the U.S., right? So it's true that in the U.S. generally,
Yaron,
legal laws are much more relaxed.
You went on for a little bit there, so let's let Matt make some progress in addressing your point.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when it comes to GDP, I mean, it's funny you point out Finland and Sweden. We've got, of course, Denmark and Norway, whose GDP per capita is much more.
But just happen to bring that up, we could.
I know, but their GDP is much more similar to the U.S. And I think it's actually important here on a kind of measurement level, because this is a mistake a lot of people make. I think the key measure here has to be GDP per hour worked. And the OECD puts that out. And the reason why this is the case is because, as you're saying, we need to make the right adjustments. Different countries choose different amounts of work hours, right? So in the Nordic countries, the standard is by law, you have 5 weeks of mandatory vacation each year, right? The US has no mandatory vacation. I think the norm is 2 weeks. So, you have to bring those things in. When you adjust for that, productivity, right, when they're actually on the job, is very, very similar to the US, especially in Norway and Denmark, less so in Finland at the moment. The other thing is that I think, I won't go into the regulatory stuff. The regulatory, well, I will go into it. So the regulatory stuff, if you've ever looked at the indexes that are used to measure this, Heritage is I think the one that puts it, is the most kind of prominent. What they'll look at is things like how many steps does it take to register a new business? And because the Nordic countries have these like really efficient centralized states, they show up as being sort of less regulated in that sense. But when you talk about product regulation, environmental regulation, and labor regulation, it's you get a much different story. But on the labor regulation point, and this is where a lot of confusion comes in as well, the labor markets in those countries are governed by collective agreements. I actually am curious what you think about unions, but they have these sector unions that negotiate sort of labor market frameworks for entire sectors. So all the employers get together and they have their little employer organization. All the workers get together, they have their union, and they hash out kind of a whole agreement for the whole sector. And so depending on how you view on that, maybe on your view, you're like, that's great because it's not being done through the state, so it's not coercive. I don't know. But it tends to be stricter than what we have here. It's just done through this collective bargaining instead of through regulation. I forget where I was going with all that. Well, so I guess the long story short here is their growth on GDP per hour has been faster than the US, right? So when they're working, their productivity has been going up and up and up and up, despite the fact that they have this extensive welfare state. I do think it's interesting also, and I kind of butted in, that, you know, you want to distinguish between, when I point out the big welfare states grow about as fast as the smaller ones, you know, you try to kind of poke some holes in it by saying their GDP per capita is lower. I think I've addressed that. But if we focus on productivity growth, you know, one of your responses is to say, well, we haven't tried sort of like the no welfare state. You're comparing small to big, and maybe there's not a big difference there, but you know, you're not comparing to no welfare state because we don't really even have that like in the data set. And that is true. But I would say from a practical perspective, if you're not going to get no welfare state, if that's pretty much off the table because it just doesn't exist anywhere, it's cool to advocate it. I'm not against it. But if you're going to acknowledge that you're going to have some welfare state, and then from there acknowledge that the big ones grow basically just as fast as the small ones, and the big ones get you better equality, especially if it's run efficiently, then just go with the big ones. You're not really sacrificing anything. Maybe you're sacrificing something relative to no welfare state you maintain. I don't agree, but maybe you are. But you're not sacrificing anything relative to small welfare state. But you're getting more gains from having the big welfare state. Again, if you care about inequality and poverty. The last thing I'll push back on here empirically is he says, they don't really spend that much more than we do. Now, you know, it does depend how you measure this, but in the kind of conventional all government spending divided by GDP kind of metric, they're spending about 15 up to maybe 20 percentage points more of GDP than we are. Now, I will say the quibble I'll have there is that their health expenditures get plopped onto the government budget. Our health expenditures are put into a private, accounts.
Medicare, Medicaid. So not all of them.
Except for Medicare and Medicaid, right? But if you were to plop those private, if you were to take the private share of health spending and just run it through the government, you would be quite close to some of those countries.
My point. Yeah, I mean, I've never looked at GDP per hour, so thank you for pointing that out. So I pulled up a chart, the OECD chart for GDP per hour. It is kind of interesting. The most productive country in the world is Ireland. Something's wrong there.
You do have to exclude Ireland because of the way that they account for the corporate profits.
But it is interesting that GDP per hour worked is higher in Russia than it is in the United States. I don't really believe that. It is also true that countries like Colombia in Latin America are higher than the United States. Costa Rica is higher than the United States. Something's very wrong with this measure. I mean, I'd have to think through what exactly is wrong with it, but it's messed up. Israel has a very high GDP per hour worked. Maybe that makes sense.
You're looking at the chart where they index it to the 2015 value of that country.
Oh, so this is growth. So Russia's grown from 2015 to 2020. Even that is very questionable. So I'll have to think about GDP per hour. There's something wrong about that, just generally, but I'll have to think about that more fully. But
click down where you can click to U.S. dollars there. If you go to U.S. dollars, down in that little chart under perspectives where it says 2015 equal 100, you can switch that to U.S. dollars. You'll still get the Ireland outlier, but the rest of it's much more coherent looking.
Yearly, quarterly, latest data.
This is just a really fun moment here because Matt is clearly so familiar with all of these numbers that, like, you know, as Yaron starts to read it out, he knows exactly what website he's on and he can direct him to.
Yes, you're there. I'm not a dilettante, so I'm familiar with that. Yeah, this is like a little bit of a woodshedding there. Like, yeesh. That's giving me the...
No, scroll down, click on the other thing, you know, like...
Yeah, walking, you understand he's walking him through... He's like, no, you need to read the legend there. You're on this site. Like, you're misreading the chart, and here's... Like that is like what you say to a student is that kind of shit, because I've been doing this and you don't know what you're doing. You're a young person. It's like, oh, that's giving me the feeling I had when I saw the Naomi Wolf, recorded as dead.
Oh my God. Yes. Death recorded.
And that's that's unlike anything. That's like a special, but this is giving me that same feeling where it's like, oh no, this is giving me just a little.
Yeah, I
reminder.
think also
Incredibly
like,
brutal moments here. Pretty strong moment.
Look, I'm obviously enjoying this because I like Matt and I think he's, on the side of the angels in this debate. And I'm obviously, feel about what Yaron stands for the way we've discussed, but there is also just a practical tip here for anybody who wants to do this themselves, which is don't try to look shit up in the middle of a debate. Like, it's just not going to go well. Like, it's like if you're looking something up for the first time, then like, it's just, there is a reason why when people are like researching things to try to find out information, they tend to give themselves a little bit of time and not just like glance at it for 5 seconds. But all you could possibly do in the middle of a live debate is glance at it for 5 seconds. And if you do, it's very likely that you're going to get stuff wrong. So, I would just leave this alone. I think there's no shame in saying, oh, that's interesting. I haven't looked at that measure. I'm going to have to get back to it.
Exactly. It's so easy to gracefully say, oh, I haven't seen, there's a lot of things to look at in the world. I haven't seen that one yet. I'll tell you, right. I'll take a look at that. It's so easy to gracefully recuse yourself from that and maintain credibility. And, sometimes when you're in a debate type moment and someone brings up something that you just haven't heard of before, like here's something in the news from this morning that's related to what you guys are going to talk about. Like you will sometimes find yourself doing the hasty, trembly fingers web search, but usually it's just for like, oh, I see, and it's this thing. Like, but if it's for like, trolling for data, if you're doing an empirical part of the debate, I mean, I would at least. Yeah, you got to invest some minutes. That's exactly right. That's what we would tell our undergrads.
Yeah. Give it like 10 minutes to like really scrutinize the website and make sure you're reading it right. So I did just briefly before we go back to it want to go back to something Yaron said a few minutes ago, which is he made a really interesting concession. He said. Well, you don't know, like, because he was presenting this as a polemical point, but I think in effect, it's like a pretty huge concession. He says, well, you don't know what would happen with old people and poor people in a really free market. It's like, okay, do you? And if so, how? Right? Because if you're saying that Matt doesn't know that, like, what's the disconnect here? Right? Is there some like does the Ayn Rand Institute have like a crystal ball that points into the alternate universe where they got all their policy prescriptions that like, so Yaron has gotten to see into it, but Matt hasn't? Because like, otherwise it seems like either both of them are in positions to make reasonable speculations about that, or neither of them know.
Does the Ayn Rand Institute's always known to have one of the few surviving palantiri. They are able to see into the minds of acquisitive people, and they're able to like influence the weak-willed and so on. So that's very exciting. But it's interesting because I was thinking about that same point too, and it really annoys me. And this is something that I always say when I talk about or with libertarians. Like with libertarians, it's always like, again, at that it's like that abstract level of, but I reason that no one would allow themselves. Why wouldn't they save to get money? It's like just the most facile, abstractified reasoning. So when you talk to libertarians, you shouldn't say if, but when. When we did, this is America. When we did have exactly what you wanted as an economy, we had a Gilded Age, laissez-faire economy. The whole political economy of the first century or more of this country is complete laissez-faire for fortune building and commercial development, and if anything, throw money at it, like with the big essential infrastructure like railroads, but like let them go. Like, what do we get? Like an insane class of evil millionaires who are richer than today's billionaires in terms of what their money bought and how powerful they were. You get constant spikes and crashes all the time, long depressions that go on, insanely brutal conditions for everybody, whether they were, all kinds of positions. It's slaves for some of that period. Then by the Gilded Age era, it's a huge number of stupendously poor people, like toiling and trying to get anything out of these ruling class bastards. No labor unions, no government regulation, no Federal Reserve, no income tax. And what was it? What was the situation of poor people? Did they save diligently so they're able to survive? Like, again, Bruenig already mentioned, like, if you look at just the most basic time series graph of poverty among seniors, elderly poverty, it's extremely high going into Social Security, and it's extremely low today. Like, it's not what would happen if they would save money. It's a matter of when. They did not save enough money, especially, as Bruenig says, the ones who are not in the higher income deciles. So that's something I always like to say when it comes to libertarian ideas. Well, when we did this, everyone was poor and we had a tiny ruling class that ran us. Like, that's something that we can always bear in mind.
Yeah. And you don't even have to go back to the Gilded Age. I mean, you could look at like Michael Harrington's book, The Other America from 1960, about poverty in America, which is from 1962, right? So just just a few years, before the Great Society, and it's a really dismal picture. And this is like, yeah, look, I mean, one, not everybody, like, there's the thing that Yaron might want to emphasize, but I would draw an opposite conclusion from it, which is that not everybody sort of is as good at saving as everybody else, and it's like. And his conclusion presumably would be, well, to hell with you if you aren't. If you're bad with money, you deserve whatever you get, comes to you. But I would point out that the consequences of making bad decisions are very different depending on your starting point, right? Like,
that's it. Like, again, it gets a comfortable thing. Like, well, you make some investments, you make some bad investments. It's okay because I have money generally. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's just surreal to watch people generalize from themselves out so much.
If you don't have very much money, then one or two bad decisions could have catastrophic effects, right? If you have lots of money, a long series of catastrophic decisions can be fine, right? Like that they have that you can ultimately bounce back. I mean, presume like Hunter Biden is still alive, despite having as far as I can tell, just his entire life composed of nothing but bad decisions.
Wall-to-wall fuck ups there, yeah.
Yeah. Like a lot less fucking up than that, right? Will completely destroy your life depending on your family background. But like, so that's one thing. But then another thing is that, I mean, again, Yaron keeps wanting to talk about people who could work but just choose not to for some reason.
He's so insistent on it. They cannot let go of we must have contempt for the Untermensch. Like these. Oh my God! What is? Someone explain it to me.
It's like, well, okay, but like disabilities do exist, right? Like, that there are genuinely people who can't, and of course, like also this also relates to the point about saving for retirement. That if you have like an unexpected and expensive medical crisis, as is a thing that happens, right? Then even with private health insurance, right, then like you still end up paying for so much that like if you had to live off your personal savings, you end up being completely fucked.
Especially because these guys want to have deregulated markets, like the era before the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, which regularizes like public disclosures and weeds out a stupendous amount of fraud in markets, which these guys, of course, fucking hate like poison because it implies investors aren't all wise, all-seeing wizards themselves.
I keep saying like
you get scammed on some snake oil shit and lose all your money, grandma. Like that happens now with all these modern safeguards.
Right. It's like Yaron was talking earlier, like, oh, if we just had like all the free market stuff I want, there would just be nothing but endless economic growth forever. But of course, that's not how economies work, right? You have, booms, but you also have busts, and I take your point is like, yeah. And when, we had closer to what he advocates in the Gilded Age, all that, then the boom bust cycle was way worse. right? That it's been, it's been since. So the empirical evidence would suggest that not only is it not true that like truly free markets would just mean uninterrupted growth forever, but like actually you'd have way worse busts and slumps than you have with like more economic regulation. But also like, look, maybe you could claim even in the Gilded Age, it wasn't quite unregulated enough. And, you can tell some kind of story about that, but it's like, look, if Yaron gets to peer into his alternate universe where all the Ayn Rand stuff has happened and, and come to the conclusion that everything's great here, then let's, it's good for the goose, good for the gander, right? I have this like, hey, the problem with the Soviet Union was that they didn't have true full communism, that like if we just had if we just had a completely moneyless system with bottom up planning by, workers' councils, whatever, then, I looked into my alternate universe and I saw that was even better than your alternate universe.
Yeah, take that.
It's like the, it's like, oh, your alternate universe has infinity growth. Well, mine has infinity +1. So, like I mean, all you have to go on is what's happened in the real world, right? Like, so we can like extrapolate in reasonable ways from like analogies to things that have really happened. But like at a certain point, you are limited a little bit, by your evidence. And like, again, if we don't have the Yaron Brook alternate universe to judge by, we, like what we do have is that the United States exists now. The United States as it was, where it was way worse to be old or poor, before the invention of the modern welfare state, that existed, and Denmark also exists. And it's like these three examples seem to order themselves pretty naturally into a series of the societies that you would more and less like to live in.
Yeah, seems like a easy choice in that scenario. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still just thinking about like how excited we're getting to talk about people who don't want to work. I feel like Ben, you and I were speaking after our last show where we watched the first portion of this and just referring briefly to Mr. Brook. And I think the word supervillain might have been used in terms of his willingness to say like, well, yes, those children are weak, they will perish beneath our feet, like he has that characteristics. I feel like if I met Yaron again, I would just want to be like, yeah, so what is up with those people who don't want to work? Like, why do you think that is? I feel like that would really open up an exciting new horrifying side of Yaron's views that we can learn about. Like, so next time I'm going to try to get him talking more about, what is it with those people? Are they just not as good as you and me, or what is that? Like, I feel like I would get an entertaining.
Yeah, why don't they want to work?
Race hierarchy out of that or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and it's so weird. It's like, like paint a picture for me, right? Why don't they want to work? This is very confusing. Also, by the way, if there's some implied contempt for people who, don't want to work and all that, then this does bring us back to Matt's point at the very beginning of this video about factor payments. Like there are more ways to not to live without working than getting welfare payments. There's also stuff like stock ownership and inheritance, right? Those are two of the more popular ways of living without working. And do you also disapprove of those, right? If not, right? What's the difference? Is lack of work only bad for some people's souls, or is it bad for all of them?
What about that recent Guardian headline, which is from memory, but I believe it was 100% of these billionaires under 30 inherited their fortunes.
Yes,
a headline to think about throughout the day, I found.
Yeah, there are currently currently 0 self-made young billionaires. That's that's like, again, if you disapprove of living without working, then I would shine some of that disapproval in those other directions.
Lazy retirement.
Yeah, it's like, again, since we do live in a society where, that has downturns as well as upturns, right? Like, clearly you at least acknowledge, or I think, that in the real world, even if it's not in your anarcho-capitalist paradise, like, yeah, I know he wants like a minimal night watchman state, but whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like, even if in your hypothetical paradise this wouldn't be the case, and like, do you at least acknowledge that in the actual world, there are downturns as well as upturns, and so thus, rather predictably, times which people who want to work can't do so.
Seems irresistible when put in that way. This again, I mean, Ben, it's arguments like that are why scary professors like you need to be taken away by giant SWAT team cops.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it's because argument. What am I supposed to say? This guy's making me feel threatened, so he's making my ego feel threatened at least. So I feel.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, I saw we do have another one of those. This is.
Uh-oh.
Get on. Get on. Get on the ground. Oh my God! Give me some cops. Oh my God! You be more fascist. You are Hitler. You are a laughing dog. Shame on you. May you never live another day. I am a professor. This is a Hitler professor, everyone. I am a professor. You're rabid dogs. You're
Yeah. So, just in case, weren't feeling extra proud of how, we as a society are rising to this occasion, and the, free and open exchange of ideas on college campuses. Yeah, I mean, this is just like, this is really horrifying. I don't even know.
Yeah, it's pretty, man, these are really ugly. Did I hear at the end professor of economics? Did I imagine it?
Yes. Emory University economics professor, Caroline Fullen.
Professor Fullen, well done.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be my turn soon enough. That's
that's just like, again, I don't, it's like, oh, thank God, that woman was wrestled to the ground and put in those handcuffs, or
Yeah.
she probably,
that was a close one.
Yeah, exactly. She probably would have killed everybody there with her bare hands if they hadn't done that.
I really feel she was just about to reach off camera and get like a flamethrower. I think I saw a flamethrower. Fuck it. I think I.
Yeah. No, that's
my God, this is. Every time I see these moments, I just think truly the wisdom of Solomon is still with us. That's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, we have like just again, like, hey, you want to end this? Ideally, you could actually just like, divest from, like actually do the things that your students in fact want you to do, and like divest from your investments that that seem to be related to killing children. That would be my first choice, right? The second choice would be, anybody who's glanced at a calendar might be aware that the semester is almost over. Like, you could literally just wait them out. Like, this is, and you would not have to wait very long, right? Like, that's, that'd be the second choice. That's like, this is just, this is really just like, I don't, we have, like, what are the options they rejected as like too extreme? It's like, okay, well,
it's, well, we have a dental program. We could gas them all, I suppose. And,
yeah. It's like, oh, nope, too much. Okay,
cross that one out. All right. Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah.
We could flood the camp. No.
Yeah. Now Curtis over here suggests that we nuke the Emory campus, but that's too much. It's
Do we get it? Yes, but it's just not the appropriate.
yeah. It's like, okay,
My God.
I just, it's just really unbelievable. But yeah, okay. Well, who we haven't heard from in a minute is Yaron Brook. So let's pick this up.
Anyways, the way it goes is you've got Ireland and Luxembourg, which are kind of jokes, and then you've got Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, Denmark, then the U.S.
Norway's a joke, right? Norway's a joke because, and this is why I exclude Norway when I do these comparisons. Norway's an oil country, right? Its wealth is derived from Black Sea oil.
The thing.
It's a tiny little country, very small.
If you do mainland GDP, you can get pretty similar figures for this.
Just focus on Sweden, Finland, Denmark. You should get the thing, and those countries on a GDP per capita are pretty poor countries.
Denmark and Sweden have us beat though, without the oil. You see it in that graph there. Or I don't know if you pulled it up. Denmark and Sweden have us beat on GDP per hour worked.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd have to think about what that exactly means and what that implies. But I think a lot of that has to do from my conversations with people in these countries. It has to do with the fact that we're so much more regulated, so much more difficult to get stuff done in the United States than it is over there. And there's a massive, of course, we don't, people don't talk about this, but there's also a massive free rider problem that the Nordic countries have with the United States, the world has really with the United States, because some ridiculous percentage of all innovation happening in the United States, and nobody pays for that innovation. They free ride off of it. So, you take the United States out of the equation, the rest of the world is a lot poorer than just the elimination of the U.S. GDP. There's something about the fact that something like 70% of all healthcare innovation happens in the U.S. Something similar to that in terms of tech happens as well in the U.S. Those are maybe they're not captured in the GDP per hour worked, but they're captured. They have to be captured somewhere, and they're mainly captured at the end of the day in the GDP per capita, in the fact that we're a lot wealthier, and we're not just wealthier because we work longer hours. There are countries that work longer hours than we do. Korea.
Well, we are with Sweden and Denmark, obviously, because again, GDP per hour cuts through all that. Now, I get what you're saying, which is that their GDP per hour is also inflated because they are stealing all of our innovation without contributing their own. That's the whole cuddly versus cutthroat capitalism stuff from 2012, I think it was. And I mean, honestly, that stuff's just been thoroughly debunked. If you look at indicators of innovation, the Nordic countries are just as innovative, if not more. So you can look at triadic patents per million of population.
Maybe per million population. But if you look at Silicon Valley, if you look at California, then per million population, California's far more innovative than the Nordic countries.
So that's a good one as well, right? So they'll do these measures based on like unicorns per capita, and Silicon Valley does top the list. But what's second for tech unicorns per capita is Stockholm, Sweden. That's where we got Spotify. That's where we got Minecraft. That's where we got Klarna. There's like 5 or 6 others. Skype. That's all coming out of the Stockholm tech scene.
Israel has more unicorns than Sweden. Just as an aside. But
per capita in a metro area. That's because you use Silicon Valley.
You can take Tel Aviv, and they have a higher percentage of unicorns than Stockholm, Sweden.
Well, I read it in the Financial Times. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, what can you do?
This is really weird. I actually spoke in person to Mr. Bruenig about this like last week. He was in LA, and I hanging out with some people I know at a bar, and I went over and hung out for a little bit, and he mentioned this moment, and what struck me at the time, it's like, well, let's just take it as given that Tel Aviv produces more tech unicorns per capita than Stockholm. I mean, I don't know why he believes that, because he, you know, it kind of sounds to me like he doesn't actually know that, but whatever. Let's just treat that as the case, right? Okay. What would that prove?
Yeah. Yeah, all this. No, this. At first, I thought it was a joke. He was like, "Well, Sweden has more unicorns than the United States." I was like, "What the?" Oh, right, unicorns, as in high value, not yet public venture capital backed firms. Literally hearing nominal intellectuals arguing about which country has more unicorns. And I appreciate it's a thing about innovation in small firms. I just mentioned just the way that is being expressed annoys the shit out of me.
Yeah.
If you're a My Little Pony adult fan, then you won't understand that, but that's just irritating me. But also, like, this is no way to discuss innovation. Like, here, I really think Bruenig is. I mean, obviously, that's an argument you could make, and it's making me think about it differently. Like, there is like a Scandinavian tech scene that's real, as he was pointing out. But it's just remember all this innovation, like innovation, growth, and innovation. That's all libertarians and conservatives will tell you get from capitalism. You get growth and innovation in products and growth. There's all this growth. There's no money for the environment or for social democracy, but there's just tons of growth, and it's really good. Innovation in this modern era, as you and I have discussed a million times, like, it's primarily a public sector driven phenomenon where all the fundamental money losing, super uncertain of ever getting success research and development happens through the military or through the university system or through the public health bodies like the NIH and shit. Like, that's where the fundamental R&D and all your new molecular entities and all the fancy networking technology that we have today, runs on the basic web and internet technology. That's all out of European research facilities and publicly funded research universities and the Pentagon research arm. So at any time it comes down to arguing about innovation, like, don't let yourself get pulled into who's got more unicorns. Kiss my ass. Like, here I really would take it differently than Bruenig if I was. And I did when I yelled at Yaron Brook. I guess I did do this because that proves that I would do it. I did do it. Like, that's the thing to do. Like, don't let them have any credit for innovation. Like, their innovation is turning, like, internet technology into a fun product that addicts young girls to scrolling Instagram. Like, that's the level of innovation they're good at, is turning that new molecular entity into a gel tab, which is not a small role, but it's like a reward for that. That's all. Fuck them ever getting away with innovation. Don't let them do it, people. Ever.
But it's also like, look, if there's a pygmy standing on the shoulders of a giant here, there's really no doubt about who's the pygmy and who's the giant, right? Like, between like actually developing the new molecular entities and like figuring out how to like turn it into the gel tab and market it.
Get a cherry flavor into this new molecule. Like, that's kids like grape. We found grape, that's good. Make it grape flavor. That's really
creating whatever's going on in this unicorn heavy sector in Tel Aviv that Yaron's thinking of, right? Like Waze or whatever. It's like, what was a more basic innovation than that? Global positioning, right?
Yeah. God, essential to all of this stupid shit. It's your global positioning system. It's so great that some private enterprise created that. Don't look into it, but that's what happened. It wasn't the U.S. military, and it's money, endless money funnel.
But it's like, I totally agree with you. The point you're making is the much more basic and important one, but like it is also a little bit funny how it's like, okay, but like, look, I got a million objections to Israel as is obviously relevant to, our non-Brook versus Bruenig programming tonight.
I hope a gigantic cop screams in your face and pushes your face into the ground to keep me safe from what you just said, Ben. Oh my God.
But also like, it is a more social democratic country than the US is. I mean, they do have national health care. Like, so it's like, I don't, if that is true about Tel Aviv, again, it sounds like he's just kind of, it sounds true to him. So he's saying it. Like, I don't know if it's true or not, but if it is true, It's like, okay, what does that prove? Like, this is like, doesn't that still sound like a country with a much bigger welfare state than we do is like producing lots of innovation?
It's like arguing about universal health insurance versus socialized medicine. Well, let's start with the damn insurance. Like, why are we arguing about socialized medicine? We wouldn't even have national insurance. It's true.
Exactly. And like, also, you notice that he's going back and forth on California. Like earlier, there were a bunch of points earlier in the debate where California, it's like, my God, the Socialist Republic of California, right? Like that's the, like California is just awful with how it's like, it's that it's barely more free market than Denmark or whatever, right? That like, or maybe even worse, right? There's so much big government in California. He was saying all that shit like 15 minutes ago with the video. But like now he's like, oh, see, our more free market system leads to more tech innovation. Look at all the innovation in Silicon Valley in California, right? Which is it?
Oh shit, that is in California. Oh my God, that's right. I forgot. He probably also just forgot that.
Yeah, it's just, there seems to be a very strange California double standard here. And also he's like, what, like his resistance to talking about innovation per capita. It's like, well, okay, but if they have just as much innovation towards per capita, the fact that the U.S. is a bigger country suddenly becomes highly relevant here. Like, it's like,
not for nothing that happened.
I mean, per capita would seem to be the measure of like who's pulling their weight, but also like, look, if it were true for the sake of argument that like proportionally speaking, like a crazy amount of innovation is happening in the U.S., here's some good news. We're not endangering that with more government involvement in the economy because that is largely, as you said, a product of government involvement in the economy. Like that's how, like the NIH, the Pentagon, yes, global positioning system, the internet, the touch screen, like these are all things that were developed by the public sector. So like, this is just the idea that like, look, I know it sucks that, it might seem wildly unfair that if you have like a severely disabled child or, you have like an elderly relative whose savings were completely wiped out in 2008. Remember that? Then it might seem unfair that you have to pull all the weight of supporting that person, that we can't distribute that around the population with like a taxation based, welfare system. But just think of the innovation, right? We need to be able to do it's granny might be eating cat food, but like, but we don't want to disincentivize those amazing Silicon Valley innovators. Like, that doesn't really seem like we're faced with that trade-off.
Yeah. I feel like I could cope with that. And he specifically mentions healthcare. Most healthcare innovation comes from the United States. A stunning sentence to allow yourself to say during a debate. There's one thing Americans don't like hearing is we've changed your healthcare. Oh, probably in a good way for me. Oh, good. We've had a new healthcare where you pay dollars every day in case we treat, like, just healthcare innovation is a phrase that is not necessarily going to buy you tons of credit with Americans, just to add that in there.
Yeah. I mean, again, technological innovation in healthcare, inventing genuinely new molecular entities, et cetera. Good. The sort of constant churn in the healthcare system as we have it, not so good.
We innovated a new way where you have to pay every time we put the stethoscope up to your chest.
Yeah. Well, this is also like this is also literally like the innovation the private sector is doing is mostly in like, how can they scratch off the serial number so they can charge you a bunch for it, and tweak it just enough that it's their thing, and they can determine the price for it. But in any case, we should go to the post game for patrons. If you are a patron, you should already have the link to that. I did not do that earlier. I was distracted by the today's unpleasantness and that we've been watching occasional videos of, but I have posted that now, so you should see that in your inbox. If you're not a patron, there's never a better time than the present to get your life together and become one. But in any case, we will see you in just a moment in the post game.